The flight began smoothly, but one red cap sparked a chain of events that shattered everything. She thought she was in control, putting a passenger in his place, but that passenger held the power to decide her fate. She'd made her move, now the consequences would unfold. The morning started like any other on a flight from Boston to San Francisco. Passengers shuffled aboard, dragging carry-ons and cramming them into overhead bins while flight attendants glided through the aisle with polished smiles and practiced greetings. Among them was Laura Bennett, a sharp, no-nonsense flight attendant known for her take-charge attitude and fierce commitment to her principles. Laura didn't just work the cabin, she commanded it. Everything ran smoothly until Laura spotted him, a man in his mid-40s, clean-cut, seated quietly in economy. Nothing about him stood out, except the red baseball cap on his head, bold and unapologetic, emblazoned with "Make America Great Again." Laura froze, her eyes narrowing. To her, the cap wasn't just cloth. It was a provocation, a symbol she couldn't ignore. The man, unaware of the storm brewing, adjusted his cap, leaned back, and opened a magazine. His calm only stoked Laura's fire. As she moved through the cabin, serving pre-flight drinks, her gaze kept darting back to him. Finally, she stopped at his row, tray in hand, her tone laced with biting sarcasm. "Nice accessory," she said, loud enough for nearby passengers to hear. "Trying to make a statement?" The man glanced up, offering a polite but distant smile. "It's just a hat," he said, returning to his magazine. Laura's lips tightened. "Just a hat?" Her blood boiled at his dismissal. She felt her convictions surge, urging her to act. Back in the galley, she vented to her colleagues, her voice rising. "Can you believe this guy, flaunting that cap like it's nothing? It's offensive. I can't let this slide." "Laura, it's not our job to police what people wear," a senior attendant, Megan, said gently, trying to defuse her. "Let it go. Focus on the flight." Laura scoffed. "We have rules about offensive behavior. That cap is offensive. End of story." Ignoring Megan's pleas to de-escalate, Laura marched back down the aisle, heels clicking sharply. She stopped before the man, arms crossed, staring down at him. "Sir," she said, her voice now formal but icy, "your cap is causing discomfort to other passengers. I'm asking you to remove it." The man closed his magazine slowly and met her gaze, unflinching. "Thank you for your concern, but I'll keep it on." His steady tone only fueled Laura's resolve. Her voice dropped colder. "Then I'm afraid your behavior violates our policy. Remove the cap, or you'll be asked to leave the flight." The cabin grew tense, passengers murmuring, some exchanging wide-eyed glances, others whispering. The man didn't argue. He stood, gathered his belongings with deliberate calm, and walked toward the exit without a word. Laura's triumph felt empty as she watched him go. His composure, his refusal to engage, gnawed at her as if she hadn't truly won. But she brushed it off, convincing herself she'd done right. Someone had to take a stand. As the plane doors closed and the flight prepared for takeoff, Laura resumed her duties, head high. But the real turbulence was yet to come. When the flight landed in San Francisco, Laura felt she'd won a moral victory. As passengers disembarked, she stood tall, certain her actions were justified, even righteous. There'd been whispers among passengers, but in her mind, she'd restored order. As her colleagues finished assisting the last travelers, Laura gathered her things, eager to tell friends how she'd handled the cap guy. But as she neared the jet bridge, her steps faltered. Standing there was Richard Hayes, the airline's chief operating officer. Tall, impeccably dressed in a charcoal suit, his expression was stern enough to halt a jet mid-flight. His presence was rare, and his locked gaze on Laura sent a chill through her. "Laura," he said flatly, skipping pleasantries. "We need to talk. Follow me." It wasn't a request. Passengers and crew glanced over, but no one spoke. Laura's confidence wavered, but she nodded and followed Richard through the terminal to a stark office, bare except for a table and 2 chairs under harsh, fluorescent lights. Richard gestured for her to sit, then closed the door. He didn't mince words. "Do you know who you removed from that flight?" His tone was frigid, each word precise. Laura straightened, masking her unease. "Some disruptive passenger. He wore inappropriate attire, and I was ensuring other customers' comfort," she said, her voice tinged with defensive pride. Richard stared, then dropped a stack of papers onto the table with a thud that made Laura flinch. "That disruptive passenger," Richard said slowly, "was Edward Marshall, the owner of this airline." The room went silent. Laura's face paled as the words hit like a nosedive. "Wait, what?" she whispered. Richard leaned forward, unyielding. "Yes, Laura. The man you humiliated, the man you kicked off for wearing a cap, owns this company. And he's requested to meet you personally." Laura's heart sank, her earlier confidence replaced by dread. She tried to speak, to justify herself, but her words faltered. Richard didn't let her recover. "Let me be clear," he said, voice lower. "You let personal opinions override professionalism. That man broke no rules. He wasn't disruptive, you were. Thanks to you, we're facing an internal crisis." She opened her mouth, desperate to explain, but Richard silenced her with a raised hand. "You'll speak to Mr. Marshall now. I suggest you think carefully about how you handle this, because the consequences will be severe." Her stomach churned as she nodded. As Richard opened the door, Laura felt trapped, the weight of her actions crashing down. The turbulence she'd caused was far from over. Laura Bennett stepped into a sleek, glass-walled office on the top floor of the airline's San Francisco headquarters, her heart pounding. The room was pristine, with a mahogany table flanked by sleek leather chairs. At the head sat Edward Marshall, exuding quiet authority. Gone was the casual demeanor from the flight. Now, in a crisp gray suit, he looked every inch the CEO. His calm, piercing gaze made Laura's palms sweat. "Take a seat, Laura," Edward said, his voice steady, almost too calm. Laura hesitated, then sat across from him. The silence was suffocating. "Why don't you tell me what happened this morning?" Edward began, leaning back. "I'd like your perspective." Laura swallowed hard, her words tumbling out in a frantic mess. She explained she thought she was protecting passengers, that the cap created a hostile environment. But the more she spoke, the flimsier her reasoning sounded. Edward listened, his face unreadable, not interrupting. When she trailed off, he leaned forward, elbows on the table, letting the silence linger. "Laura," he said, his tone measured, "do you know why I fly economy sometimes?" She shook her head. "It's to see how my employees treat passengers, not through policies, but on the front lines. Today, I got a clear picture." Laura's stomach dropped. "You let your beliefs justify humiliating a passenger," he continued, voice calm but firm. "You didn't ask why I wore the cap. You didn't care that I was quiet, bothering no one. You assumed. And that showed your judgment trumps professionalism and our company's values." Laura tried to speak, but Edward raised a hand. "This airline stands for respect, for every passenger, no matter their beliefs. If you can't uphold that, you don't belong here." His words landed like a gavel. Her mind raced, searching for a defense. I understand," she whispered. Edward leaned back, folding his hands. "You have 2 options. Resign now, no questions asked, or stay, but only if you complete a rigorous training program on ethics and customer relations. I'll be watching closely." Laura's throat tightened. Resigning meant admitting defeat, and she wasn't ready. "I'll take the training," she said, voice shaky. Edward nodded, expression neutral. "Good. I hope you realize how close you came to losing everything over one bad call. Don't make me regret this chance." As she stood to leave, he added, softer but firm, "No second chances after this, Laura. Make it count." Outside, Colleagues avoided her gaze, their silence deafening. For Laura, this was more than a career hit. It was a brutal lesson in restraint and the peril of assumptions. As she left the building, one thought haunted her. How could a cap nearly cost me everything? The aftermath was swift. Laura enrolled in the training, her every move scrutinized. The incident sparked company-wide discussions on professionalism, and Edward's economy-class flights became legend. Laura worked to rebuild trust, but the sting of her mistake lingered. She kept her job, but her perspective shifted. She learned to see passengers, not symbols. The skies were calmer, but for Laura, the lesson was clear. One rash choice could ground a career, and true control came from humility, not confrontation.